Hello everyone, my name is Dashti and I'll be speaking for the Dashti Institute today. So what I want to be talking about is if you did not know, there was a magnitude 5 earthquake in Kuwait in June 4th, and gladly no one was hurt, no damages occurred from what I see in the reports. And I want to talk about this because first, I'm from Kuwait, and second, I just graduated in petroleum engineering, and I wanted to clear out some misconceptions that some people may have when it comes to the earthquakes that we cause. Now, we do cause earthquakes, but how we cause them, you should know so that you can attack the right things and not attack the wrong things. So here is the president of the Saudi Society for Geosciences. This is what my father sent me, and I had a lot of issues with this. So he's saying that the earthquake was caused by the withdrawal of quantities of oil. I think that is wrong. I think it is not by the withdrawal of oil, it is the injection of water. And I'll be showing you a lot of papers that will hopefully convince you here. And what he's saying is that we're not replacing it with enough water, and I think no, it is the replacement that is the issue here that is causing the earthquakes. So first, I want to show you some key numbers here. So it's a magnitude 5, and over here it was at a depth of 5 kilometers and 3 miles. I'll get into a little bit. I'll show you something about those numbers, but try to remember them. All right. So here is Oklahoma. It is in around 2009, they started getting earthquakes that they've never had before. They're not next to any tectonic places. Um, so, what can cause this issue of human-induced earthquakes that are in higher than 3 magnitude, right? Right after 2009. Uh, so let's go here real quick so that we can look at the stats. So around 2009 to present, they've been having a mean depth of, you guessed it, 5 kilometers, 3 miles. Looks similar, doesn't it? Let's look at one of the events here, 2011. They recorded a magnitude, the highest I believe was 4.8, close to 5. So, not very different from Kuwait, and it's all caused by I believe they talk about, yes, uh, disposal of wastewater produced during oil extraction that has been injected more deeply into the ground. So it's not the extraction, it is the disposal. It is very critical. And what does it say here? Hydraulic fracturing. Oh, they're talking about hydraulic fracturing. Anyways, uh, so one key thing here is that Kuwait has been injecting water for 2 decades now. So it's not something we don't do, it's something that we've been doing for a while. And this is an example of a real earthquake that is not caused by us. It was located at a depth of 18.6 miles and 30 kilometers below the floor of the Pacific Ocean. Uh, well, it's below the floor of the Pacific Ocean, while ours is not below any floor. And uh, it was 30 kilometers, so it is around 18% of what we had in Kuwait. So you can see the difference in depth and magnitude right here. I believe this was a magnitude of around 9. So yeah, big difference in magnitude. So one thing here that the geologists are talking about is how does injection of fluid cause earthquakes. So what they say is when you have a fault, fluid pressure increases within the fault, and that can counteract the friction forces, which makes the earthquake more likely to occur on them. So what they're saying is here, so this is a fault you have underground, and say you have your house, say you have a very, like, this is your house, right? And you have a wall here that is injecting fluids into the ground. What would happen is when you inject fluid, usually, well, it depends on why you're injecting it, first of all, but when we do water flooding, for example, you want it to sweep everything. So you want it, so say, like, here, let me just do a line real quick. Say this is, you're injecting water here. You want the injected water to move like that and swipe everything into maybe a well you have here. Or maybe you just want to sweep it from down below, and you want it to go and sweep this entire thing. But what would happen here if you have a fault is it would go through the fault. Why is that? Because the fault is a path of least resistance, and that's where water likes to flow. And when you have all your water is flowing through this fault right here, it will start creating pressure. Now you're injecting water thinking that it is sweeping, right? You're injecting with a lot of force, but it's all of it is going right here, and this can cause an earthquake. You can see water going here into a fault, and your house is right there. You would probably feel it, and it would not be good for you. So hope this clears this down how injected fluid can cause it. And let's go into the magnitudes here real quick. So a magnitude of -4, we would not feel it, as small as we can record, so it's irrelevant kind of to us. -3, relevant as well. -2 is big for Barnett. So what does that mean? Barnett is a place where we do hydraulic fracturing. So when we do hydraulic fracturing, we're basically putting fluid into a pressure to break the rock, and then we produce from that rock we just broke. And uh, that causes a magnitude of -2, which you would not feel. When do you start feeling it? Around 3. So here you would not feel it. It's irrelevant. Here is the biggest in Barnett. So this is the biggest hydraulic fracturing recorded at a -1 magnitude. So still not felt. Here is the issue down here. It's the geyser, sorry, in California, and it is the largest event at a field. So you'd say, aha, gotcha, look at that. But here's the thing here. So geysers, impact of injections, seismicity. So you see this the issues with injection. And let's look at some academic papers here that do talk about it. So I noticed a trend in the ones that do support the idea of fluid extraction causing seismicity to be quite old, around 2 decades old. Uh, these are all the ones that I could find. So there's this paper here that does talk about it right around. So here it says fluid extraction rather than fluid injection can cause stresses through poroelastic deformation. Earthquakes appear to have been induced by fluid extraction in gas fields and oil fields. So why don't we look at those researches right here? So by Gumberg, Wolf, Sobak, and Zinke, right? So here is Gumberg and Wolf, and this is the keyword here. They had injection wells when they were doing their research. I wouldn't trust the research all that much if they did not go into this, and then it is quite 2 decades old. Let's look into Zobak and Zinke. Micro. They're looking at the micro level, not the levels that we can feel. So it's kind of irrelevant to our case. Remember, they're looking down here. Yes, we do cause those of the oil field all the time, but you will never feel them. You'll only feel them when we do injection. So this is the issue with those two guys. And the third guy, Segal. Oh, the problem with that, I cannot look into details here because I have no access to the PDF. Maybe I do. Yes. So could not really look into if they're talking about the macro or the micro. I would say they're talking about micro level because this is a small change in pressure. This happens all the time in oil fields, so we would probably get a lot more earthquakes if this drop in pressure causes earthquakes. Now, if you're unaware, this is around 150 psi, I believe. So we would be feeling that like crazy if this causes a micro scale. And they do not list a scale here, so it's hard to say. And here's another supporting one for the fluid extraction, but it's very poorly worded in the discussion, so it's hard to say whether it supports or not. And it does not cite the evidence. So I believe right here it says this is an agreement with many cases of observed induced seismicity. No citation. So I can't really look into what he's talking about here with the agreement. And he's saying that his calculations, he basically ran some calculations, and it got him magnitude of 2 to 3 that are caused. And over here he says that they're not very significant. So I'm not sure what he's alluding to here. It's very hard to say, but here are some documents here that are recent research that does say that injection is what caused seismic events. So seismic events and the probable role in reservoir simulation. Oh, this one is talking about hydraulic fracturing. So if you remember in our scale, hydraulic fracturing was here in the micro scale, and this one was talking about how hydraulic fracturing is in the micro. It causes micro earthquakes, which you would never feel, but you would only know they exist because we put these geophones and they record the smallest disturb or the smallest quakes around -4. So they record a lot of things, and I hear that if you do not install them correctly, they can record a cow moving in the ground. So just so you can get a reference into how much they can record, and that's how we know that they do cause micro earthquakes, but it is irrelevant to what happened in Kuwait. And also, I wanted to say that a lot of this research came out recently because of Oklahoma. People were trying to ban fracking because they thought fracking was causing these earthquakes, and it turns out water injection was causing them, which is why I think anything after the period of 2009 should be taken more seriously than before, since this is a huge issue now, and they were trying to clear those misconceptions out. They came to the conclusion that it is the water injection that's causing these issues. And here's one that looks at heavy oil. Why heavy oil? Because if we're gonna do secondary recovery in Kuwait, it's gonna be on heavy oil, and it is seismic events that happen to heavy oil in Alberta. So it's in Canada. This is gonna be United States down here, and these are the fields, and they're heavy oil. So very similar to when we do injection in Kuwait to help out, and they're doing steam injection. Makes sense because heavy oil, you want to warm it up to prevent asphaltene and all that. But the issue with that is it is causing earthquakes, is what this paper is basically saying. And we go to this document here. Uh, Pressure increase during wastewater injection to prevent. So here they're talking about how they've had an increase in magnitudes of, or sorry, an increase of earthquakes that are bigger than 3 uh, magnitudes around 2009 2014. That is because and that increase was limited to few areas where there was injection of fluids. So this goes back to injection, not extraction. And then here is another one that also talks about Oklahoma. Remember why Oklahoma is critical? Is because it is very similar to the earthquake magnitude that we saw in Kuwait, and very similar in depth. Depth is the critical point here. And they hypothesized that injection wells close to faults, remember why faults are important, right? Is what causes these earthquakes. So this is where I wanted to end it. I hope that I taught you guys very valuable lessons. I hope that I'm correct in what I taught, as from my own knowledge and from the research that I looked into. It could be biased, which is why it may lean elsewhere. But I wanted to teach this so that we target the right things if we are going to target something. So do not go against oil extraction, and do not push for putting more water if you don't want to see earthquakes. So know what to attack and know what not to attack, and know that also this is not related to what this guy wrote, but know that also fracking does not cause these events, is what I wanted to go into, and I hope that I taught you something. This is Dashti for the Dashti Institute, and I'll bid you farewell.